Hi everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Maor and I'm a spiritual advocate and a guide of pranic living and consciousness awareness. Well, a lot of my subscribers have asked me to share more about myself, to share more about my spiritual discovery and about the journey that has led me so far. Most of you that are already following me understand that I was the type of guy that was a little bit more extreme. I wanted to experience everything in this incarnation as furthest as I can go, unlimit myself, and understand what is true spirituality for me. In this era where a lot of things are about religion, a lot of things are about governments, about belief systems, I wanted to understand what the human being is, what is the consciousness of the human being, and how can I, a person that is much more in the mental phase of his life, much more in the thinking, a logical person, can take out of the emotional part and the spiritual part. Because for me it was only a logical understanding of what it is. I understood that I was raised to be sort of a robot, taking my belief systems from my family, from the country that I live in, from television, thinking that society is built in the way that we see it through the television set or through the computer screen. And slowly I understood that things are not exactly as they seem to be. I understood that there's a lot hidden behind the scenes that nobody tells us about. My biggest change started when I was about 24 years old. It was 1 year post my military service in Israel, where I usually live. I had to do 5 years of military service, which was mandatory. 3 was mandatory and 2 was optional. And after that, most of the Israelis are so traumatized that they choose to go abroad and celebrate life and go on these really long excursions. 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. So when I was traveling in South America, I fell in love with an American girl from Flagstaff, Arizona. And after my travel there, I went to stay with her for a couple of months. And in that time, I downloaded some books. I was always very intrigued with aliens, I was like the X-Files expert, always understanding that there's much more and much more beyond. When I was 14 or 15 years old was the first time that I read the channeling, The Law of One, the raw material, which changed my life and transformed me. I didn't really understand it then as I understand it now, and that's why I read it 2 more times. So I fell in love with this girl and I stayed with her, and she was in college. So while she was away during the days, I just read these books of a guy that called himself Rael. He's from the Raelian movement. It's R-A-E-L. And he was talking about explaining that all humanity came here from a creation of an alien race. This is not necessarily a true thing, but I'm just saying it raised my curiosity, and I decided to join their movement for a while. And I was there for 2 years, and there I learned about meditation. I learned about cultivation of happiness through scientific methods. I learned about open relationships and sexuality. I learned about globalization because I met, their organization has 70,000 people around the world, and they have workshops once a year. So it was very interesting for me to meet these type of people, and I took from there as much as I could. After about 2 years, I ended up in a relationship with one of the Israelis, and that kind of traumatized me, and I decided to leave the movement because I understood that it was more like a cult-based movement. It had all the characteristics of a cult. But it opened up my mind, and then I started seeking. I understood that the intention of the seeker is the thing that starts the seeker's journey. It begins with information. After that, it becomes emotional and then spiritual, because it has to begin from the intention, the will of the person to want to understand more. By that time, I was about 26 or 27. I had a long relationship. After the relationship ended, I was heartbroken, and I decided to go traveling again. This time I went for 1 year around the world. I came back when I was about 30, and then that's when the big spiritual leap happened. Because what happened is that I started volunteering. I understood that I want to give out more to society. I started volunteering in a place in Tel Aviv with 100 other people. I like to call them 100 other light workers that volunteered with me. And together we went on buses and made people laugh and sing. We visited the people that didn't have any family members in hospitals. We did all these like really nice things, but we understood that volunteering has to come from within. So the change and the work we did was a spiritual work on ourselves, to develop ourselves consciously. So every Sunday we had a 3-hour session working on ourselves, doing different workshops. And one of these people was called Tal. And Tal became a very good friend of mine. And one day he told me, Ray, I haven't been eating for a year and 7 months. And I was like, really? And skeptic. And suddenly I feel it's like this very, very strong pull. Now I understand retroactively that this pull was from my higher guidance. Today I'm so connected with my higher guidance that I don't feel that way anymore. I feel intuitively. And then I understand that I'm being given a message, a download, a channel, whatever it is that you want to call it. So Tal told me about that. And I went home, I thought about it. Over a course of about a month, 2 months, even 3 months, I had some ayahuasca ceremonies done and I just went on with my life. But always this thing, this pranic living thing that he mentioned always came up, always my subconscious. Now you probably noticed that when you're not thinking about anything and a thought comes up, it's probably something that you need to think about, something that you need to deal with, a person that you need to call, anything like that. So after a while, I just came back to him and said, look, I have to experience this. I have to experience this. I cannot live my life without experiencing this because ayahuasca has showed me, because my guides keep telling me about it, because they're very persistent with me. They always tell me like that any repetitive thought is something that I need to act upon. So we scheduled the time. It was the end of 2012, the big event that was supposed to occur. And I scheduled it right after, so in case something happened like the end of the world, I won't have to do it. And in order to become a pranic living person, you have to go through this like workshop. We call it the process. And the process is mandatory. You cannot do this by yourself. If you want to do this by yourself, it will take you years and years. And you really have to be persistent with yourself and with your habits and become very, very aware. But we decided to do the short way. That's the way everybody likes to do it today, right? We're looking for shortcuts. And I did a 21-day initiation. And that created the biggest leap in my spiritual journey. Because I went there thinking that I know what I want, thinking that I know who I am, what my beliefs are, where I can reach emotionally and spiritually. And everything blew up in my face. I thought, because we always think that we understand ourselves and we think that we know. And then when we discover one day that we don't really know, and then after another day we discover that we don't know anything. And the amount that we do know is probably something that is very suspicious and we need to rethink about it. So instead of being in the knowing, we're trying to be in the being much more. And that really changed me. My breatharian initiation really changed me from the bottom up. Now it didn't happen in a day. The process itself was amazing. It was 3 weeks of silence for me. And today when I teach it almost a week and a half, because in a group, the group intention and the energy and the shifting energy of the planet, we can do it much faster now. But then I was alone, talking to ants, watching the sunrise and the sunset every day, being in a constant meditative state. I read 11 books. I did a lot of art. You're not allowed to have any Facebook or phone or email or anything like that. So you're pretty much with yourself. And when you're with yourself, you have to work on all the things yet you think that you don't want to admit that are troubling you. And this is something that I had to go over there. Even if I didn't want to admit that my bad relationship with my father has to be fixed. I didn't want to admit that I'm disappointing myself in certain fields. I didn't want to admit that I'm in a relationship that I'm afraid to, that I'm holding on to, and I'm afraid of giving it up. And it's not serving my highest good. All those things I didn't want to give up, I didn't want to admit. All those things are ego-based. And once I went over those ego-based things and I fixed them one by one and I understood them, I became more aware. Once you take away food, some high awareness comes into the body. The body is no longer busy digesting all the time. And you will understand this if you will fast even only for 1 day. Or just on water or just on juices, or it really depends on the type of fast that you want to do. And that made the leap. I came out of there, I didn't feel very strange. The only thing I felt strange about is not needing to eat anymore. I was skinny as hell. It took me 3 months to gain back my weight even though I wasn't eating, and it changed me. I became less muscular. I lost a lot of weight in the beginning. I became more feminine. I became more vulnerable. I didn't want to be with women for a while. I just, not because my masculinity disappeared, it was because I was in such a high vibration that I didn't understand why sexuality was needed. And I was up there and I didn't want to become grounded. And sexuality can be very, very grounding if you're doing it in the 99.99% normality, the way people do it today. And some things changed. One of the things that's changed is my femininity, my patience with myself and with others, my ability to view others as myself, even if it's something that I would have judged before. The day-to-day judgment disappeared. I started accepting things as they are. Instead of judging humanity for allowing people to die of starvation and understanding that we, the Breatharian guides, have some solutions for that, I accepted things as they are right now, became much more connected with nature, rediscovered relationships through a different means or a different perspective on life, wanted to make love instead of fuck, wanted to experience less of narcotics or alcohol or caffeine, or actually I became the observer of all of my bad habits immediately. Immediately they all came. Some of them I solved, some of them I accepted, some of them I reduced, some of them I limited. I understood that the ego is just a part of me and I could have a direct conversation with him, understanding that the ego is afraid. It's really afraid and I should really treat it like a small baby. I should really like caress him and tell him that I love him and it's okay and there's nothing to be afraid of. So there was a lot of things that happened for me to become who I am today. And relationships is a big part of that. I had most of my life, I think ever since I was 15 years old, I was always in relationships. I grew up with a mother and a bigger sister. So I grew up in a house that didn't have a masculine energy, didn't have a good father figure until I became about 11 or 12 when my stepfather stepped into our life. And up to that point, I understood what the best methods of communications is much more with the feminine side than with masculinity. Meaning it was easier for me to approach women, friends, girlfriends, relationships, even when I was very, very young, because I had a mother and a sister, didn't have a father figure. And ever since then I became, my first relationships were not that good and they weren't bad. It's just that I never really felt the need for a deeper connection. They were very superficial, you can say. So that's why I had more friends with benefits than I had normal relationships. That changed when I became in my 20s. That changed when I had like a big leap in that around 24. I started falling in love. I started becoming more vulnerable. I allowed myself to become more vulnerable. I let myself completely go and melt in the feminine energy, in the love for my relationships, and of course for my wife now and for my newly born daughter, Nulin. And the openness of my spiritual path, my openness to feeling more and allowing myself to simply be a feminine guy or a person that is very, very authentic, even without any tact, just says whatever he feels like saying. All these things happen only in the last years, ever since my pranic living initiation, because that was like the biggest leap. And this is actually what I see with a lot of my students as well, because it's not really about the food, it's more about ourselves. It's the acceptance of ourselves with the defects that we have, with being not perfect. And from that understanding, we can truly make the biggest leap to the next stage for each one of us. And every one of us has a next stage. But not everything was amazing in my spiritual journey. Actually, 3 years ago, after the pranic initiation leap that I was mentioning before, I had a crisis, a big crisis. I asked my guides before that to give me more, to give it to me more concentrated, to give it to me faster than ever before. My ego wanted it faster. My ego didn't want to have the patience to learn things as they naturally occur or as nature likes to unfold them for me. And what happened is that in 1 year, I lost a very, very good friend to drugs, unfortunately. And in the way that I lost him, he had a nervous breakdown. We had to commit him. He stole money off me. We went to court. There was cops involved. There was ambulances involved. It was crazy. I lost a relationship of someone that I really, really loved. I lost something that equals about $150,000 in 3 different incidents because I didn't allow myself to express emotionally a depression that I had. So, the universe, it will always teach you and it will always level up. Meaning, if you weren't taught from one little thing, it can be a disease, it can be a feeling that you had, it can be something that you don't want to admit, but it's a lesson that you wanted to learn. If you won't learn that lesson, then the universe will show you another lesson very similar, only stronger. So, if it was a disease, now it will be a very, very serious disease. If it was something that you didn't deal with, and for me it was not dealing with my emotions back then it will show it to me again. So the first thing that happened is that somebody burned my motorcycle. I was living in Tel Aviv, 4 o'clock in the morning, knock, knock, knock. Cops open, I opened the door for cops and they say, "Are you Mr. Maor? Yes, your motorcycle is on fire." So I went down there, not admitting what I feel. I was like looking at that, and then in 2 seconds my mental body kicks in and he tells me, "Ray, everything's okay. This had to be for a good spiritual reason, probably, right? So what can you learn from that?" Immediately, it's a mental thing, it's not an emotional thing. The first thing I said, okay, I'm going to take the bus. So I'm going to meet a lot of people that I don't usually meet, or I'm going to see the mainstream, because on my motorcycle, I always get to work fast in 20 minutes. So it also told me I'm going to learn a lot of patience. Instead of taking my motorcycle in 20 minutes to get to work, it will take me about an hour and a half to 2 hours to take the bus either way. And then another thing told me, or my guides told me, you're also going to learn how to give up money because your motorcycle is worth a lot and you don't have insurance for fires. No motorcycle does. And so all these mental things came in. And again, the problem was that I wasn't dealing with it emotionally. And then after that, that thing with my friend happened. And then after that, I lost another big investment. I invested all my money in a real estate deal that happened in Canada. And apparently, me and 600 others were fooled. We were simply tricked into investing with a company that seemed to be solid, that had roots, that had a past, and had all the right numbers and everything. So everything started happening until I understood that I need to deal with it emotionally. And that was the biggest leap, emotionally, because then I became sad, I became depressed. I allowed myself to express. And when I allowed the emotion to go through me, and it didn't take a long time, it took a few days, I took out my pain, I wanted to have vengeance, I wanted to even kill those people that tricked us, that tricked everyone, because that was like my whole life savings. I went from a big plus in my bank, to very big minus, because I said, you know something, why don't you put in a little bit more than that and your salary will cover, the debt that you have to the bank right now. So I was really, really optimistic apparently back then about that. So what happened is that in that short year, after that short year, suddenly I remembered that I asked my guides, I asked the universe to put me on the turbo, to press the turbo button, to have everything faster, all the lessons. And then I told them, I'm sorry. I am sorry for asking for everything to be faster. Please give it to me in the speed that you deem best for me. And I can tell you that because I am who I am, and I feel that I'm a very strong individual and a strong mind, a strong will, then I go through very, very deep experiences that I can't really share. Some of them almost broke me. I know that people are after some good positive energies. They're trying to change us, because once you begin changing the light workers and get the light workers into the darkness, then you're actually continuing the control over the planet. The light workers, especially the guides, the mentors, the ones who remember who they are, they remember some of their incarnations, they remember what their job is here, to wake up other people, or to wake up the light workers that will wake up other people. Either way, I know who I am because of this amazing journey that I had. I remember a lot of things about myself. And because I know who I am, they know who I am as well. So some people awaken slightly before others. And then the dark energy, or the dark people, or however it is that you want to call them, we know they exist because they're out there and they kind of like control humanity. They're after you. And these things are not necessarily people. This thing can be negative entities that come. This thing can be really harassing. They're very, very negative. They can come in different methods. They can come as a friend or a new friend that eventually changes you in some way. They can come as a potential investment, and they drag you into their life. And I've had that 2 times, terrible times that every time I just remember them, I have shivers all over my body. I'm talking about crazy experiences, people that know how to change another person just by looking at them and manifesting their will, people who treat other people like shit, like robots, talking and being very condescending, thinking that they're acting like they're manic, and their energy is manic as well, and it sucks you in. So I've had that awakening as well in my spiritual journey. And that's the last thing I wanted to share, because this is really like the biggest things that I had. All these things made me who I am today. Very peaceful, very calm, knowing who I am, which is the most important thing in this life, I think. So I'm happy that I was able to share. I was aiming for a 10-minute video. I think it's a little bit more than that. So my name is Maor. If you enjoyed this video, please share it or simply like it down here. Thank you very much for watching me on my YouTube or my Facebook channels, and have a great day.